A 20-meter wire stretched across the Berlin rooftop, catching invisible signals from the sky. Below, an 11-year-old boy hunched over a contraption of his own making, a slide coil, a tungsten tip, a crystal, and hope. The year was 1923, and Fritz Sennheiser had just witnessed the birth of radio. Born on May 9, 1912, in the Karlshorst district of Berlin, Fritz grew up in a Germany still reeling from the Great War. His childhood unfolded in an era of rapid technological change, where the future seemed to crackle through the air like the radio waves he captured with his homemade receiver. Yet despite his obvious fascination with electronics and engineering, young Fritz harbored a different dream altogether. His heart belonged to gardens and plants, to the quiet work of cultivation and growth. When he finished grammar school in Berlin in 1932, he hoped to become a landscape gardener, to spend his life working with soil and seasons rather than circuits and signals. But the world had other plans. Germany in the early 1930s was in the grip of economic depression. The financial collapse that began in 1929 had devastated the country, leaving millions unemployed and countless industries in ruins. Career prospects in landscape gardening, like so many other fields, had withered. Fritz faced a choice: cling to an impossible dream or embrace what he called his second love. He chose the path of pragmatism, enrolling at the Technical University in Berlin to study electrical engineering with a focus on telecommunications. It was a decision that would change not just his life, but the future of audio technology itself. The boy who built radios from spare parts was about to become a man who would revolutionize how the world captured and transmitted sound. The Heinrich Hertz Institute for Oscillation Research hummed with the sound of innovation in the mid-1930s. Here, Fritz Sennheiser found his calling, working alongside Professor Vierling on a project that merged music and technology in unprecedented ways. Together, they developed the Grosstenorgel, an electric organ that transformed electrical signals into musical expression. The work was exhilarating, pushing the boundaries of what electronic music could be. Fritz completed his studies at the Institute in 1936. The same year, he created a reverberation unit that would be used at the Summer Olympics in Berlin. Even as a young engineer, he was already contributing to events of international significance. When Professor Vierling moved to Hanover in 1938 to establish the Institute for Radio Frequency Technology and Electroacoustics at the Technical University, Fritz followed without hesitation. He became deputy director of the new institute, helping to build it from the ground up. The work was demanding but rewarding, combining research with teaching, theory with practical application. In 1940, Fritz earned his doctorate, a crowning achievement that recognized his growing expertise in electroacoustics. That same year, he took over lectures from Professor Vierling, stepping into a teaching role that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. The former landscape gardener had become Dr. Ing, Fritz Sennheiser, a rising star in German engineering. But the world around him was changing in darker ways. Germany was at war, and even the most abstract research would soon be pressed into military service. The years ahead would test not just his technical abilities, but his resilience and vision for what might come after the chaos. The demands of war transformed Fritz Sennheiser from an academic researcher into a military cryptographer. From 1940 to 1945, he worked on cryptography and the radio transmission of coded messages for the German army. It was sensitive work, vital to military communications, and far removed from the electric organs and acoustic research he had pursued just years before. The war brought destruction as well as duty. In 1943, Allied bombing raids destroyed the Institute in Hanover, reducing years of research and equipment to rubble. Fritz and his colleagues relocated to Wennerbostel, a small village outside the city, where they continued their work in makeshift conditions. As the war ground toward its inevitable conclusion, Fritz could see the writing on the wall. Germany was losing, and losing badly. The question was not whether the war would end, but what would remain when it did. By early 1945, the situation had become desperate. Allied forces were closing in from all sides, and the infrastructure of German research and industry was collapsing. Many of Fritz's colleagues had already fled or returned to their families, seeking safety in the chaos. When the war finally ended in May 1945, Fritz found himself in a devastated country occupied by Allied forces. The Hanover region fell under British control, and the occupiers wasted no time in imposing restrictions. Research in radio frequency and encoding was prohibited as a capital crime. German scientists were barred from using their own factories and laboratories. For most men, this would have been the end of the story. But Fritz Sennheiser was not most men. In June 1945, just weeks after the war ended, he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. The abandoned laboratory in Wennerbostel offered little more than 4 walls and a roof. But to Fritz Sennheiser, it represented possibility. In June 1945, with Germany in shambles and most people focused simply on survival, he founded Laboratorium Wennerbostel, which he called Labor W for short. He had 7 employees, his personal savings, and whatever equipment remained from the wartime research facility. The British occupation forces had made it clear: no radio frequency research, no encoding work, no telecommunications. Fritz needed to find products he could build that would not run afoul of the restrictions, items that would generate income in an economy that barely functioned. He and his small team began building measuring instruments from leftover equipment, scavenging parts, and improvising solutions. Their first products were tube voltmeters, precision instruments that measured electrical voltage. Fritz sold them to Siemens, one of the few German companies still operating. It was unglamorous work, far from the cutting-edge research he had conducted before the war. But it kept the laboratory running and his employees fed. More importantly, it kept the team together, preserving their expertise and skills for whatever opportunities might emerge. In 1946, Siemens approached Fritz with a new request. Could he build microphones? The DM1 microphone project marked a turning point. For the first time since the war ended, Fritz was working on audio equipment, the field that would become his legacy. The following year, 1947, Labor W launched its first self-developed microphone, the MD2. It was a modest beginning, but it established the company's direction. Fritz Sennheiser was no longer just surviving the post-war chaos. He was building something new. Post-war Germany was hungry for reconstruction, and that hunger created opportunities. As the 1950s dawned, film, television, and radio production began to boom. Studios needed equipment, and Fritz Sennheiser was ready to provide it. The MD21 microphone became one of Labor W's early successes, a reliable workhorse that found its way into recording studios and broadcast facilities across Germany and beyond. It accompanied historic moments, capturing the voices of personalities like John F. Kennedy and Louis Armstrong. Each time someone spoke into an MD21, they were using technology that had emerged from a small laboratory in a German village. But Fritz was not content to simply refine existing designs. He pushed his team to innovate, to solve problems that other manufacturers had not even recognized. In 1956, Labor W introduced the shotgun microphone, a revolutionary design that could capture sound from a distance with unprecedented directionality. The following year, 1957, the company developed one of the world's first wireless microphone systems, freeing performers and speakers from the constraints of cables. These were not incremental improvements, but fundamental advances that changed what was possible in audio recording and broadcasting. The MD421 microphone, introduced in the early 1960s, became perhaps the company's most iconic product. Studio engineers loved its versatility and sound quality. It worked equally well on vocals, instruments, and broadcast applications. Over the following decades, more than 500,000 units would be sold, and the MD421 would remain in continuous production for over 60 years. Fritz had built more than a successful product line. He had established a reputation for quality and innovation that set his company apart in an increasingly competitive market. The name Sennheiser was becoming synonymous with professional audio excellence. In 1968, Fritz Sennheiser and his team introduced something the world had never heard before: the first open-back headphones. The concept was counterintuitive. Conventional wisdom held that headphones should seal the ear, blocking external sound to create an isolated listening experience. Fritz thought differently. His open-back design allowed air and sound to pass through the ear cups, creating a more natural, spacious sound that many listeners found more comfortable and realistic. It was a bold departure from established practice, and it worked. The innovation exemplified Fritz's approach to engineering. He did not simply accept conventional solutions or follow market trends. Instead, he encouraged his developers to question assumptions, to experiment, to pursue ideas that might seem impractical or even impossible. This philosophy of creative freedom became central to the company culture. Fritz believed that truly groundbreaking innovations could not be forced or scheduled. They emerged when talented people had the time, resources, and encouragement to explore. He prioritized innovation and discovery over immediate financial gain, a stance that sometimes puzzled more profit-focused competitors. But the approach paid dividends in the long run, producing a steady stream of industry-leading products. The MKH-816 shotgun microphone, developed in the 1970s, became an industry standard in film production. Its combination of directionality, sound quality, and reliability made it the go-to choice for location sound recording. In 1987, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences recognized the MKH-816 with a Scientific and Engineering Award, acknowledging its contribution to cinema. For Fritz, such recognition validated not just a single product, but an entire approach to engineering and business. Quality mattered more than quantity. Innovation mattered more than imitation. And the long view mattered more than the next quarter's profits. Fritz Sennheiser never abandoned his academic roots. Even as he built a global business, he maintained his connection to teaching and research, holding the title of professor alongside his role as company founder and leader. This dual identity shaped how he ran his enterprise. He viewed the company not just as a profit-making venture, but as an ongoing research project, a place where engineering challenges could be explored with rigor and creativity. His employees were not merely workers, but collaborators in a grand experiment in applied acoustics. The company grew steadily through the 1960s and 1970s, expanding beyond Germany to serve international markets. Sennheiser products appeared in Hollywood movies, on Broadway and London stages, in major broadcast facilities worldwide. The brand became associated with professional quality and reliability. Yet Fritz resisted the pressures that led many successful German companies to sell out to larger conglomerates or move manufacturing to cheaper locations. He kept the company family-owned and maintained German manufacturing, even when doing so meant lower profit margins. For him, these decisions were about more than economics. They reflected his values, commitment to quality craftsmanship, loyalty to the employees and communities that had supported the company, and a belief that some things mattered more than maximizing shareholder returns. The Audio Engineering Society recognized Fritz's contributions with a fellowship in 1976 and honorary membership in 1980. These honors acknowledged not just his technical innovations, but his influence on the entire field of professional audio. By the time he retired from active management in 1982 at age 70, Fritz had transformed a 7-person operation in a war-damaged village into a global leader in audio technology. But retirement, for Fritz Sennheiser, did not mean disappearing. The office in Wiedemark remained Fritz Sennheiser's second home long after he handed over day-to-day management. He attended shareholder meetings, visited factories and offices, and maintained a vivid interest in the company's direction and products. For Fritz, the business was inseparable from family. In 2005, at age 93, he sat for an interview in that familiar office. When asked about the company's 60-year history, his response was characteristically direct. Family is number one, and this is how it should always be. It was not just a statement about succession planning or ownership structure. It reflected Fritz's fundamental belief about what gave life meaning and what made a business worth building. The company could have been sold many times over the decades, likely for substantial sums. But keeping it in the family meant preserving its values, its commitment to quality, its culture of innovation. The decision to remain family-owned set Sennheiser apart in an industry increasingly dominated by corporate conglomerates. It allowed for long-term thinking, for investments in research that might not pay off for years, but maintaining manufacturing standards even when cheaper alternatives existed. In 2002, the Audio Engineering Society awarded Fritz its gold medal, the organization's highest accolade. It was the capstone of a career that had spanned nearly 7 decades, from the electric organs of the 1930s to the digital audio technologies of the 21st century. By 2008, the family-owned business employed 2,100 people with manufacturing facilities in Germany, Ireland, and the United States. Annual sales reached approximately $500 million. Yet the company remained true to the principles Fritz had established in that abandoned laboratory in 1945. Quality over profit. Innovation over imitation. Over imitation. Family over everything. Over everything. Fritz Sennheiser lived to see his grandchildren take the helm of the company he founded. In 2013, Daniel and Andreas Sennheiser became co-CEOs, representing the third generation of family leadership. For Fritz, then 101 years old, it must have been profoundly satisfying to witness this continuity. The transition to the third generation validated his insistence on keeping the company family-owned. His grandchildren had grown up understanding the values and culture that made Sennheiser unique. They had learned not just the business of audio technology, but the philosophy behind it, the commitment to giving developers creative freedom, the focus on quality and innovation, the belief that some things mattered more than quarterly profits. The European audio industry's history remained inextricably linked with Fritz's name. His innovations had set standards that competitors still followed decades later. The shotgun microphone, the open-back headphone, the wireless transmission systems. These were not just products but paradigm shifts in how audio technology worked. Other companies might have grown larger or generated higher profits. But few could match Sennheiser's consistent record of innovation or its influence on professional audio standards. The company's products had captured some of the most important sounds of the 20th century, from political speeches to musical performances, from Hollywood blockbusters to intimate studio recordings. Fritz's biography as a developer and entrepreneur was considered one of the most remarkable careers in Germany. He had started with nothing in the ruins of post-war devastation and built a global enterprise that bore his name and reflected his values. He had balanced the roles of professor and CEO, researcher and businessman, innovator and guardian of tradition. As he entered his final years, Fritz could look back on a life that had exceeded even his most ambitious dreams.
Fritz Sennheiser died on May 17, 2010, at his home in Wiedemark, Germany. It was 8 days after his 98th birthday. He had lived long enough to see the world transformed by technologies he helped create, to watch his company grow from 7 employees to over 2,000, to witness 3 generations of his family carry forward the work he began. His death marked the end of an era, not just for his company, but for the audio industry as a whole. Fritz belongs to a generation of engineer entrepreneurs who had built Germany's post-war industrial recovery through technical excellence and unwavering commitment to quality. He had witnessed the introduction of radio as a boy and lived to see digital audio technologies that would have seemed like science fiction in his youth. Yet for all the technological changes, the principles Fritz established remained constant. Quality over profit. Innovation over imitation. Family over everything. These were not just business strategies, but expressions of deeply held values about what made work meaningful and life worthwhile. The company he founded continues to bear his name and follow his philosophy. Sennheiser products remain synonymous with professional audio excellence, used in studios, concert halls, broadcast facilities, and film productions worldwide. The MD421 microphone he helped develop in the 1960s is still in production, still a studio favorite after more than 6 decades. Fritz Sennheiser's legacy extends beyond products and patents. He demonstrated that it was possible to build a global business without sacrificing values, to prioritize quality and innovation without abandoning profitability, to remain family-owned without becoming insular or stagnant. He showed that the most remarkable career might belong not to the person who made the most money, but to the one who stayed true to their principles while transforming their industry. The boy who built a radio from spare parts had become the man who changed how the world captures and transmits sound.